right, let's do a quick proper introduction here and then we'll get started. So
Great.
welcome everybody. Sorry for the delay. Obviously I'm not Tom McDowell. I'm Joe Suarez here who's helping out running the side webinar here for IDTX. And this morning, kicking things off, we have Nathan Coe from Discover Financial Services. And he's going to talk to us about the good and the bad and the ugly about his journey into learning vendor management. So I'll kick things over to you, Nathan.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. As he said, certainly apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm not sure what's happening. It's probably on my end, but just keep moving forward. So yes, thank you for joining this session, My Journey into Learning Vendor Management. Hopefully you're in the right spot. And if you're not, then hopefully you'll stick around anyway and we'll learn something. As he said, my name is Nathan Coe, so you can move on to the next one. I am a principal learning consultant for Discover Financial Services. I've been in L&D for a little more than 12 years. I've worked in facilitation. The bulk of my time has been in instructional design. And then more recently, over the last couple of years, I've also been doing strategy and consulting, and as the name of this presentation alludes to, vendor management. So you can advance the slide. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context over the next couple of slides just about the company and the learning environment that I work in, just so it's a little bit more clear how things are operating. But Discover Financial Services is Discover Card, which is how it's better known. We are a credit card, a bank. We have a number of different banking products that are out there to help our customers achieve a brighter financial future. You can advance. We've won a number of awards from the consumer side, as well as just being a good place to work. And then you can advance one more. Specifically, the area that I work in is the business technology area, so learning and development for business technology. And that, you can advance to the next slide. They have something called the Discover Technology Academy, which is really a collaborative environment and really designed to offer engineers and other employees within business technology the opportunity to learn informally and share knowledge with each other, as well as more formal learning opportunities and more formal learning resources that my team and I work with and provide on that site. You can advance the slide once more. So I am referring to myself as, excuse me, an accidental learning vendor manager. As I said, I've been in learning and development for a little more than 12 years in a number of different roles. But something that I've noticed and I thought really made this a relevant discussion to have was that there generally is not a vendor manager role specifically in learning and development. Quite often, the task of managing relationships with the different vendors that a learning team would use falls on somebody within the learning team. My first experience, I've had a couple of different experiences with learning vendors. My first experience was when I was in an instructional design role and helping onboard an authoring tool. And then more recently, I've been working very closely with and actually managing the relationship with a learning content provider, like a third-party learning platform. So about a year and a half ago, I was having a conversation with my manager, and we were talking about development and development goals and things I was interested in. And she said, "Hey, I've got a project for you," which sometimes that's famous last words. And she handed me the relationship with this particular learning platform provider. And they had just gone through contracts and sales, and they had just completed all of that, and they were getting ready to start onboarding and launching. This was a vendor that we had never used before. And then that's when I was placed into the relationship as the manager of that vendor. And then from that point, it's been about a year and a half now, and I'm solely responsible for the relationship and the management of that vendor. So this presentation has a lot of experiences and wins and losses that I've come across and observations. Please remember these are mine. personally, based on my experiences. Somebody else may have totally different experiences, and their opinions may differ, but I thought it would be valuable to share what I've experienced. So you can advance the slide. What I wanted to do next, before going too much further, is just define what I mean by learning vendor. I know there are certainly different things that could be construed as, but I'm really just talking about a third-party company that is providing either learning tools or curated content, something that is helping the learning team and the company and the organization, helping them accomplish learning goals. So for me, this really means things like learning management systems, learning content management systems, learning experience tools, authoring tools, and those third-party content curators that have content already together and are providing content. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a learning vendor specifically. Okay, you can advance the slide. The next thing then is really just the four main areas that I want to discuss, and I just want to try and take you a little bit through my vendor management journey, starting with onboarding and launching a learning vendor, then moving on to how to market and just increase acceptance of that vendor in your organization. And then after that, just dealing with the contracts and sales and negotiations part of that relationship. And then finally, just taking a little bit of a high level like strategy and vision view, just things that are important to really have squared away when you start dealing with the vendor so that you can have things lined up appropriately. All right, so you can advance to the next slide, and we can jump in and start with onboarding and launching a learning vendor. All right, advance one more. So as I said, I jumped in right as the relationship had started, and no onboarding had taken place yet. And so the first thing that I really found to be important was really being clear on end result. And when I'm talking about end result, really what I'm meaning is, once you've gotten through the launch and officially put this tool out into your learning ecosystem, what does that experience look like for your users? How do you want them to interact with the tool? How do you want them to experience the tool? Because that really can define a lot of the work that you need to do pre-launch to make sure that you have things set up for the users to be able to get in and experience the tool in a way that's going to encourage them to come back. For me, as we were working with this learning content vendor, there was a lot of thought and questions around, well, how do I organize the content that's within this vendor? I didn't want our users to go into the platform and have thousands of pieces of content to choose from and be overwhelmed with trying to determine which one would be relevant to them and what they should use. So we had to do a lot of work pre-launch to kind of organize and structure and figure out what's the best way to organize content so when users come in, they can figure out where to go and where to find information and how to get that information quickly and easily. And then, besides that, there are also a number of administrative elements that come into play, and that really kind of rolls also into the second point of determining your internal processes and procedures. So, for example, with this most recent learning vendor that I've worked with, we have a limited number of licenses, and that's common with a lot of different vendors. You're paying for a certain amount of licenses, but because that's the case, that leads to a number of processes that need to be put in place for how users request a license, what steps, are there forms that they have to fill out to get a license? Does somebody have to approve those forms and approve those requests? Are the users going to use something like single sign-on to access the tool, or are they using some type of direct login? And what does that process look like? And also, who is going to be managing all of those things? So in my case, the answer was me. I'm the only one that's responsible for managing those approvals of requests for licenses and managing who has the licenses, who doesn't. So for me, it was really important, knowing that I was going to be the only one that was solely responsible for managing all of that, to have a manageable process in place so I could handle all of that work in addition to all of the other normal learning consultant responsibilities that that I had. And what went along with that too is deciding on guidelines, because I certainly didn't want it to be an arbitrary thing about, well, Nathan is in charge of licenses. If he doesn't like you, he's not going to give you one, or he's going to take it from you, or something else. So having some guidelines around, what segment of users in our company have access or allowed to have access, and then also some guidelines around if access needs to be removed. So, for me, like, if a user has been inactive for more than 30 days, then their license may be repurposed and given to somebody else. And that guideline has been set, so that way I don't have to worry about making that type of decision, or that decision coming back to me. There's a published guideline out there that's very clear that this could happen if you're inactive. So all of that was in place before launch, so that way when launch time came, there was a smooth transition for folks to be able to get access to the tool and use it. And then also knowing what's required at launch and what can come later was something that I had to learn, because there were a few things that I had to circle back to afterwards. I was taking really let's just get things launched first, and then let's go back in and clean some things up. And I know sometimes that's a necessity. You have to go through that with that mindset. But I had to go back, and one example would be create additional permissions and do some organization for manager access. And managers can have specific access and have some specific permission. That's something that I knew about and chose not to set up prior to launch. You're pushing it through the launch, and then I ended up having to go back and do some additional work. So that's something to always keep in mind is what work can be done later and what work maybe has to be done. Create a lot of rework as you keep moving. All right, so we can jump to the next slide, which is talking more about actually launching a learning vendor. So for me, the first thing was communications and making sure that I was strategic with the communication that I was putting out there. Like probably most of you, we have a lot of variety of communication options. So I had things leading up to our launch: email blasts, newsletters, internet site, and then leading up to live webinar events is when we actually kicked off and launched, and it became official and live. So I would say you'd want to consider using those different mediums to make the announcements, and then also, of course, having while the message is the same, the format of the communication is different based on the type of communication you're using. We had in-depth articles that had benefits and what's in it for me, and had instructions on how to access the tool, and we also had short blurbs for newsletters, email blasts, and then a full-blown live event, actually full-blown multiple live events to do demos and show how to encourage people to get into the platform. So we did all of those things, but the other thing that was really important, aside from just communicating about the tool itself, was just creating easy-to-access instructions and very clear instructions. That was really important for me, especially because I was the one managing all of the requests for access, was to have instructions very clear, bullet points. Here's the step-by-step. How do I get access to the tool? What forms do I need to fill out? All of that. So, making sure that that information was very public and published. Also, things like including the links to any of the forms that individuals need to use and fill out to get access. Also, including links to the actual platform itself. Making sure all those things are in that communication. And then once that communication is published, making sure that any other future communications, even post-launch, include links to that original communication that have the instructions in it, so people can actually go back and self-serve and take advantage of that, instead of having to come to me and ask me a lot of questions about how to access the tool and how to request access. And that's even an ongoing battle. Even today, a year and a half later, I still continually try and push to make sure people go to the tool and go to the intranet site, use instructions instead of. Okay, so let's keep going. and talk about some best practices for marketing and just increasing acceptance of your learning tools. Once we actually got through launch, then we needed to get into getting people to continue to request licenses and continue to use the tool more and more. So you can advance the slide. But the couple of things that were really important about marketing, one was just making it relevant to the learners. So for me, what I thought was really important was drawing as straight of a line as I could between the different features within the platform. So this learning platform, for example, had a number of skill assessment type functionalities where you could test yourself on a topic, and you could get a competency score, and then get some suggested learning of where to go to increase in that score. And so drawing a connection between using that and an employee in their development goals, performance goals, and then those conversations being able to say, I took advantage of this tool, and I used these skill assessments, and I've used that to assess where I'm weak, and then focus on increasing in that area. And that was important to make that connection, so it was really relevant to our users about why it's cool. We've gained some traction with that. I've had at least one organization within business technology this calendar year, where they've written that into their employees' development plans, is to use those assessment features of this tool so that they can continue their personal development. So that's been a win to this. It's becoming relevant to them. And then the other thing is just leaning on your vendor. I learned that your vendor wants you to be successful just like you do, because they want their relationship with you to continue. So because of that, then your vendor will probably be willing to devote resources to you to help you promote and really market as you're launching your tool. We had our vendor join for multiple live facilitated sessions where they demoed the tool and explained the features and the benefits of it, so that people could see directly from an expert how the tool could be used. Another thing that I took advantage of, they had templates. They had a lot of templates already for communications, announcing the tool, and even promoting the tool after launch. And so I was able to take advantage of those where I could just tweak them a little bit and use those in and they had a number of different formats. So something like that may be available, and even something like giving away swag. I've had vendors multiple times offer to provide swag from their company to our users if help increase acceptance. So those are all things that definitely make sure you check in with your vendor and see what they have and what they're willing to offer to help. All right, so you can advance the slide, and the next thing that we're talking about really is increasing acceptance. So for me, empowering managers and informing managers of the benefits of the tool for them and for their team was really important, especially because it was not a mandatory tool. It's a supplemental tool that individuals can use, and it certainly has a lot of benefit to it, but it's not like an LMS when they're required to go there to access their learning or access their training. So making sure that the managers understood the special permissions that they could use, and some of the team metrics that they could get access to, the ways that they can organize their team and use that to help their team in the future. That was an important part. So something that we did is we held a special enablement session just for managers, and that was hosted by our contacts with our vendors, so that they could show the managers how they could take even better advantage, as opposed to just being a learner, but also being a manager of learners to help. And I won't say that we had a huge standing ovation at the end of that meeting, but what I can say is that directly afterwards, I had a handful of managers reach out to me and request access for their entire team to get licenses to this particular vendor. So we got a little bit of traction there. And then, as I've said now, as we get to the next calendar year, I've had managers and departments that are actually writing use of this platform into their development plans and actions. So they're getting some more benefit out of it. And then guiding users to action, not just information. When I started, one of my important metrics that I was really paying attention to was how many licenses were being used up. So I was just watching that ticker go up and up and up and up, and that was one of my views of success was, are we using all of our and that's a good goal, because certainly you want people to use the platform. But something that I realized as I went out was, well, there are a lot of users in this platform, but there are not a lot of users using the platform actively and regularly. So more than, probably I would say more than half of the individuals had gone in, got a license, looked at things, and then left. And within the 12 months, they had spent maybe 1 or 2 hours total in the tool, as opposed to spending 20 or 30 hours or more in there. So what was the quality for those individuals? It wasn't as high because they weren't taking advantage of it. So my goal and my ideas have shifted from just are people getting into the platform to are people actually using and benefiting from the platform, and I think that's a more important goal now that I look back on it. So I've tried to do some things publicly this year to recognize that the platform is using it a lot. We started something like it started out something called the 20-hour club, and somebody that 20 hours in the tool got public recognition, department-wide phone calls, and other messaging sites, things like that, and it's grown to like the 25 and the 30-hour club. So it continues to grow, but we're working on publicly recognizing individuals that are not only in, but are a lot, and then getting some success stories from them, and finding out what topics they enjoy, and using that to help try and push and promote things a little bit further. Okay, so we can keep moving then, because the next thing, and this was probably the area that I had the most learnings and the most experiences, is dealing with contracts and sales and account executives and all of that. So you can advance the slide. So I'm not a naturally assertive person, and so this was probably more difficult for me than maybe for a lot of you it might be. But for me, I really had to continually remind, and still do from time to time, have to remind myself that I'm in control, and remind myself that I am the authority for my company, and I'm the authority on what my company wants, what my company needs, how my company wants to use this particular tool. So there were a number of times when I had to resist or try and fight the temptation to defer to, an account executive or representative from the company, because they, wanted to bring up a topic, they wanted to bring or push an issue that, may be related to adding on extra features to the account that, obviously come with a cost, or adding on some additional programs or something else. So it took me a little bit of time, because, what I would find is that they would want to, schedule some extra meetings so that we could talk about and they could demo the benefits of, this extra add-on feature or this extra new thing that they just got. And, what I really realized is that you don't have to say yes to that. And that took me a while to figure out. If you don't think that you're going to use it, if you don't think your company will go for it, if you don't think it's relevant, tell them no. It's okay to tell them no. Because what I realized after a couple of instances is that the unintended consequences of deferring or not telling them no to something that you don't think you're going to use is that you end up with unfocused conversations. They're conversations that are focused on the wrong thing. And then when they're focused on the wrong thing, they become less productive conversations, because your representatives from your vendor are thinking that you're going to move forward with this particular feature or something else, and you're thinking that you're not, and you could be talking about something that you guys would really both be working on. So for me, just having the mindset of remembering, like, we are paying them, we're not doing them any favors. We don't owe them any favors, I should say. And at the end of the day, if the vendor wants our business, they will work with us. And when it comes to renewal time and it's time to go to the next year and talk about whether we're going to continue the relationship, they're going to do the things that we want them to do, because they want to continue the relationship. So while they might try and steer you in different directions, they might want to try and push you towards services or features that they want you to use, if you know that it's not right for your company and you tell them no, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to continue pushing that. Or if they want to do something, it's going to be hard. Or if you want to do something, it's going to be hard for them to tell you no, unless there are circumstances where they can't because of functionality or something else. It's going to be hard for them to just flat out tell you no to something because they want the relationship to continue. And then sharing internal information carefully, I found is very important. There's the crime shows and everything that you watch on TV has the famous lines of, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And in a much less bleak way, I think really we need to have that same mindset when we're talking with our vendors. Anything that we say about our company and about the internal processes or about the goals of our company can and probably will be brought back up again later and used as leverage or discussion point as they're trying to promote or increase the reach of their company with you. And so I've had different managers that have approaches. I've had some managers that say don't tell them anything, nothing, and some managers that will tell us a lot more. And I found that probably the really important spot is is in the middle. You do have to give them information so that they understand how your company is going about using their platform and the ways that they can help you, but you don't have to give them too much information. Just as an example for us is that we once we provided some names of the VP of our area and decision makers around this vendor and their contract, that type of thing. And they were able to look up who our CIO was because that's public information. And pretty soon we were getting requests from them to have conference calls with us and our VP and with our CIO. They're trying to get as many people as they can to see the benefit of their tool so that we'll continue to use it. We even at one point had a request for the CIO or the CEO from our vendor company to actually meet up and have lunch with the CIO of our company so they could talk and have discussions about the benefits of the vendor. So just be aware that any information that you share is going to be brought back up potentially and could possibly be used to gain leverage in either negotiations or talking about adding features. Okay, so advancing to the next slide then. This next point, controlling the points of contact, this is kind of story time with Nathan, because this is one of the biggest things that I feel like I've learned over the last year. One of probably the bigger losses as well is, I mentioned earlier that we had a meeting with the managers, with our representatives from our platform to enable the managers to use it better and get better benefits from it. And we had a meeting. The vendor was there, a couple of their representatives were there to facilitate the meeting, and I was there, and our managers were there. And the meeting went through, and everything went fine. And a couple of days later, I started getting emails, having conversations with the account executive from our vendor, saying, "Hey, I was talking to this manager from this area. I was talking to that manager, and they really like this feature that we offer, and they really want to use it. And they have so many employees in their departments that they think would take advantage of it." And I'm like, well, wait a minute. How did you get in contact with all those different managers? I didn't give you their names. But we had that meeting, and just a few days later, somehow those managers were in contact with our representatives. And it becomes kind of a divide and conquer situation because these managers in other departments, they're certainly well-meaning, but at the same time, they're probably not footing the bill if we're adding extra benefits. And and they're also probably not privy to all of the goals of our department and all of the things that we're trying to accomplish. So I had to jump in there and make it clear by going directly to those managers that he's spoken with, and then making sure speaking with the account executive that I'm the point of contact to the relationship between Discover this vendor, and all of these discussions need to go through me so that we can be sure that everybody is on the same page. Okay, and I know time is coming short, so I'll move through these last couple of slides as quickly as I can. The last thing on this is just to start early, because especially when you come to like renewals of contracts, you just need to continue. Because you start even probably 3 to 4 months early, because there are generally a lot of steps, a lot of processes. If you're not familiar with it, there are probably extra applications that you have to go into to make requests through, and you might have to take time learning those things. So just start as early as you can. All right, let's move on to the fourth point so we can get through the rest of this. Okay, suggestions for decision makers, just bigger things around vision, strategy, and slide. The first thing is just the long or the short-term nature of the relationship with this vendor. So, knowing your organization, and just, I think to tell by example, I've had an experience where I was under the impression we were only going to use a vendor for like a year. And so some of the plans I had made were short-term focused, and they were only supposed to be for a short-term relationship. Things shifted partway through, and the relationship became more of a long-term relationship. Well, there are things that I could have done differently had I known in advance that it was actually going to be a longer-term relationship. And you can advance the slide because there are a couple of bullets on the last slide. But the last thing is really just how the vendor tool fits into and integrates into your learning ecosystem. There are a lot of things behind the scenes when you come to access, when you come to reporting, and figuring out who is using the tool, how they're using the tool, how beneficial the tool is, so that you can show value if you do need to renew it. And there are with a lot of those things, there are certainly a lot of back-end processes that will need to take place to get it all set up, whether you're setting up single sign-on or access, or whether you're setting up reporting. You might be using the platform's built-in reporting. You might be using APIs, and you might need some resources to connect all the data. And you just will probably need to spend some time thinking through how all of that is going to be connected together, and how you're going to, as seamlessly as possible, go from one piece to the next piece and move through their learning journey through these different particular platforms or vendors or tools without a lot of disruption. And that sometimes can take some work. Okay, so we came in with 1 or 2 minutes to spare. I do plan on over to the sessions, the Meet the Speaker session. So if anybody has questions or wants to chat or anything else, then I plan on being there for probably 15 minutes or so. And then, you can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can get hold of me if you have questions to chat or to chat. Otherwise, sorry for the technical difficulties. I know it didn't make it quite as smooth as it could have been, but we still got through everything. And I appreciate all of you being willing to kind of to push through with me, and we made it. So thanks everybody so much, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen.
Yeah, great presentation. Really appreciate that. And I know we don't have time for Q&A, but I just want to say that most everything you were saying totally vibe with my experience working at a big organization and dealing with vendors. So a lot of great advice. I really liked what you talked about like setting expectations up front and planning for what people's roles are going to be, who's going to manage user licenses and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, really appreciate that. And thanks everybody for attending. Thank you to Nathan for presenting, and we'll see everybody back in the main hub on Hopin.
Great. Thanks everyone.